Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hello, my name is Alex. I bet they weren't expecting the Alateen speaker to be 6 foot tall. So we'll try to make this work. I'll just hunch. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Ruby, for asking me to speak. I spoke at SCAC this year, which is Southern California Alateen Convention. I've been attending it for 5 years, and they finally asked me to speak, and Bear actually approached me after and just said, hey, can I get your phone number just in case? And shortly after, Ruby was calling me, and here I am. I'm 19, and I've been in Alateen for 6 years. So I guess I'll just tell you my story. Start at the beginning. I'm really, really nervous, so. Whew, yeah, okay. Just love me. I was born, this is so, can I, maybe hold it? Sorry, I know that's weird, but it's, uncomfortable. Okay, there's an icebreaker. I was born into a family that both my parents were sober before I was born. And so you can imagine that my house was filled with a lot of coffee, cigarettes, and loud, rambunctious people all the time. As Ruby said, there was hardly ever a dull moment. I had a father who, his alcoholism in his childhood made him a little bit on edge. He raged a lot. And just growing up, I remember walking on eggshells a lot. There were times where I was afraid of what I was going to say because I didn't know if I was going to set him off. I developed a lot of self-conscious issues behind that. Alcoholism truly is a family disease, as we all know, and I started to realize that my home was different than my friends' homes when I would go to their house and their father wasn't throwing things around their house and, breaking things and cussing, and when we would drive in their car, he wouldn't get angry and drive at 100 miles per hour, blowing stop signs and stoplights. And, I have a little brother. He's 4 years younger than me. And as soon as I got old enough to realize that my father was a danger, that's how I felt, was that my father was a danger, I began to get very protective over my brother. And whenever things would go crazy, that was my one thought, was I need to shield him from whatever's going on. That's what I thought. I felt like I needed to be his savior, and I kind of let myself and my feelings, I stopped caring about them. We moved around a lot, and I on the outside, I was a very outgoing kid. I was always the star of the show, always the teacher, always in, hey, look at me. But inside, I was very, very broken. I had no self-esteem. I got bullied a lot during elementary school and middle school, and I just always seemed to be the target. And I don't really know what that is, but because of my father's behavior at home, I was very, very, very afraid of confrontation, and I never, ever, ever stood up for myself. I never did anything really except for break down and cry, and I think that's what made me a perfect target for a bully. But I lived in Colorado up until I was 14, and in Colorado, I lived in a semi-small town. There were about 800 people in my middle school, and I had finally got my bearings. We stopped moving around so much, and we stayed in one place for a little while. And I had made some friends, and things were good, but I was an actress in my own life. I wasn't the same person at home that I was at school, that I was at the mall, that I was snowboarding. I kind of just wanted to fit in, wanted to belong, wanted to feel wanted. And so I kind of just did what I had to do and played the part of, whoever I wanted to hang around with. And it worked for a while, but I was very, very broken. I did not love who I was. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see somebody that I liked. I was very scared inside and very, very alone inside. Gosh, why am I crying? But things took a turn for the worse when I was 14 and my parents decided to move to California. Coming from honky-tonk Colorado, California is kind of a culture shock, especially for a 14-year-old kid that lives in an alcoholic home and doesn't have too much self-esteem. And I got thrown into a high school of 4,000 people. I'd never seen a black person before. I had never seen guys wearing girl pants and straightening their hair and coloring their hair, and things were very, very weird for me. That first day of high school was quite a memorable day. I remember coming home in tears and just hating my life. I did not want to be here. I didn't think California was cool. I wanted to go back to Colorado with my honky-tonk friends and live happily ever after. And I spent the first half of my freshman year basically on MySpace, talking to my old friends and telling them how much I hated it out here. And at this point, I didn't really realize the effect my alcoholic home had on me. And my mom, who's here, which is also making me really nervous, but my mom was like, hey, there's this place, it's called Alateen, come check it out. And a lot of people talk about how they were forced into Alateen, and that really wasn't the way it was for me. I kind of was like, ooh, friends, yes, And I went there and I got all dolled up because that's how I felt beautiful, was when I did my hair and wore good, cool clothes and did my makeup, and that's the only time that I even felt a little bit of self-confidence. And I went to the Alateen room and I didn't really listen. I kind of just was scoping out the people and seeing who would maybe be my friend. And but I kept coming back because of that, because of the welcoming way that it was. And I thought, wow, I really can make some friends. And I went to a lot of meetings before I started listening. And I'm glad that I had no friends because I wouldn't have stayed. It was an opportunity in my mind for me to make friends. And so I kept coming back, and I kept coming back and kept coming back, and then I finally, of course, started listening to what they were saying. And I realized how truly messed up my family life was. I realized the effect that my father's raging truly had on me, and I realized that I was a broken person inside. I did not, like I said before, I did not love myself whatsoever. I hated that I was tall. I hated that I was curvy. I hated my stupid Dumbo ears. I hated everything about myself. I hated that I was an actress. I didn't even know who I was. And that truly is one of the most beautiful, beautiful gifts that Alateen gave to me, is that today I can honestly tell you that when I look in the mirror, I like what I see. And I have things to offer other people. I wasn't even good enough to treat myself good, so there's no way that I was going to be able to let you take anything away from having a relationship with me. I started to change the way that I acted around my home. The first big thing that I took away from Alateen was the slogans, and I used them every day. This too shall pass, one day at a time. Think. These things I thought all the time. When my dad would start to get really, really angry, I would just walk away and know that it is not my fault he's acting that way. It's not because of something that I said. It's because that's how he knows to behave. And it is not my problem anymore. And as soon as I started doing that, I found that the rages definitely became smaller and smaller. And today, they've pretty much stopped altogether. And so I realized that my reaction to it was almost feeding it in a way. And when I stopped taking on responsibility for what was going on, I was happier, and he was happier. And I just lost my train of thought. Okay. There it is. So today I have an amazing relationship with my father, and I was always a daddy's girl, and I wanted that so bad. I wanted to just be his little girl and for him to just be happy all the time, and So I changed my behavior, and things definitely changed around my home. And I kept going back to Alateen, and I got a sponsor. And, I can honestly say I never finished my steps, which is hard to admit to everyone. But they're like going to honesty. Oh, mother. Honesty is a big part for me too. I was never honest. Like I said before, I was an actress in my own life because I was trying to cover up for how I was feeling inside, that brokenness. And it's funny that the theme of this is, what is it? A Fortune of Friends? Well, I know the idea, but the theme itself, I don't know. But like Ruby said, I didn't know how to develop real friendships. I couldn't be a real friend to you. I had to play a part in my life because like I said before, I was walking on eggshells, and I didn't even like me. I didn't understand why you would want to be my friend. When I got bullied, I felt like I deserved it. And today, bullying is a big deal for me. In Alateen, I learned that if I don't stand up for others, then nobody would stand up for me. Why would I even deserve that? And I started to open my eyes to that I'm not the only victim in the school system of bullying. And I learned things like helping others in Alateen. I got out of my own head and reached my hand out, and after years and years of going to Alateen, having things to offer, knowing things that they don't, like that is the most beautiful feeling in the world, is when you see somebody else get it and come back and come back and come back. And, I see little girls come in, and I just see that look on their face that I know I had, of just hating who I was and feeling like everything was my fault. And it's not. And that's like the biggest thing that I try to give to other people, is that beautiful gift of self-love and just protecting yourself and standing up for yourself. I never knew how to do that. Just looking back on my life, I could not tell you where I would be without Alateen. It's such a wonderful program. Another thing I wanted to talk about. My parents never actively drank in my lifetime, thank God. But I could only imagine what it would be like. So when I first came, I would hear stories, like crazy stories that the other kids were talking about of how their parents were drinking and using and everything. And I was just like, do I even belong here, But that's one thing that I want to say to any of you out there whose parents don't actively drink, is we do belong here. Alcoholism is a disease that stays with you no matter what. And my house was so much different from my normie friends' houses, peaceful and loving all the time. And it's not that my dad didn't love me or my mom didn't love me. And that's one thing I really had to learn. It was like, why is he doing this? Like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And it's not that he didn't love me. It's just that he was stuck in his own disease. And, your parent, they don't have to be actively drinking for alcoholism to affect your life. Their alcoholism could affect my children's life, the things that I've picked up. And I feel that without Alateen, I truly would be a lost soul out there. So I've, got my little warning to wrap it up. But one thing that I just want to stress to you is that I love myself today. And when I look in that mirror, I like what I see, and I'm a human being on this planet that has something to offer other human beings, and that is one of the most beautiful feelings in the world. And this program is so wonderful. When my mom started going to Al-Anon, things changed so much, and today my home is one of my favorite places to be. And with my dad is one of my favorite places to be, and we talk to each other, and we're open, and we're honest, and I'm not an actress anymore. I'm me. I'm the same me when I walk out of here as when I drive home, as when I go to work on Monday. I'm the same me, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I can walk around knowing that I love myself, and I'm beautiful, and everyone is. And, I love Alateen, and I love everyone in Alateen, and I would be happy to talk to any of you. There's not very many, but thank you for listening to my story, and I just love this program, so thanks.
Thank you so much, Alex. We need Kleenex up here. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our Al-Anon luncheon speaker, my dear friend Cathy O from London, England.
Hello, my name is Cathy, and I'm a very grateful member of Al-Anon. I still love it when you say my name. It reminds me that I'm here and that you know me. Now, I'm a short Al-Anon. So there you go. And I've got heels on. It's such an honor for me to be here today. Because Ventura County is where I first found recovery. And it was the first time that I walked into the rooms of Al-Anon, and the first time that I admitted that I needed help with my life. And I got it. There are a lot of people in this room that helped me. I can see all your faces. And I'm very humbled that I've been asked by Ruby, who is a great friend, to come and speak today. And she's been so kind and supportive throughout the whole process of me coming here. There's so much recovery in Ventura County, from meetings to speaker meetings to conventions, and I've witnessed and experienced so much, and I can't ever put my finger, recovery for me is something that I cannot touch. And yet I feel it every single time I hold your hands and that we pray together. It's a mystery, and I'm very grateful for it. As you might have guessed by now, I'm from out of town. I actually was born and raised in London, England, and I've flown over this week. I have a little touch of jet lag, which has the most fabulous effect of making me feel a little bit disconnected from my life, and lead me to asking lots of existential questions such as, who am I? Where am I going? And all these answers, gorgeous answers, come back and just say, well, you're Cathy, don't you know that by now? And God, you don't even know where you're going. You don't even know where you are, And, it's a little bit like the effects of the disease of alcoholism on me, those questions. And I get to use an Al-Anon tool and just say to my little voice in my head, thank you for sharing. It'll be okay. I'm trying to be Cathy. I'm learning who Cathy is. And I don't need to know where I'm going, because God knows where I'm going. That's God's job, not mine. I just have to try and be here. So here I am. I'd like to thank the committee for putting this all together. I couldn't do that. It looks absolutely beautiful here, and I know a lot of work goes into this, and the AA people too. And I'd also like to thank my sponsor, my US sponsor. I have two, I'm very lucky, who's also the hostess, who picked me up from the airport. And we had a little meeting in the car, and felt very blessed to have her there with me. Okay, so a little bit about where I come from. One more thing is that I'm slightly intimidated. Every single time I hear a speaker, a luncheon speaker, they've got about 25 years plus. You've got a 7.5-year-old, okay, and who speaks funny. So you're just going to have to, I'm going to trust God on this one, and I'm going to share with the experience, strength, and hope that I've got so far. At least I can walk and talk, and I'm potty trained. I came into Al-Anon because of a man I loved. He was a beautiful, sensitive, funny, loving, kind, gorgeous man. And in my opinion, he happened to have the disease of alcoholism. I met him when I was in my late 20s. I came over to California for a trip, and I met him in Big Sur, in the Redwoods. But it was actually in the English pub in Big Sur that I met him. We ended up going to the beach that night, a group of us, and having a fire on the beach. And the ranger came and joined us and brought some sake. And I looked over the fire at this man, and we smiled at each other, and then we didn't stop smiling, and we stayed looking at each other. And I fell for him, hook, line, and sinker. He told me that night that he fell for me. It was all very quick. And he later told me that he was on acid that night. And that I was the only good thing on his trip. I chose to forget about that one because it didn't fit in quite with my romantic picture. Anyway, we began this long-distance relationship, which suited me great, and it went on for a very long time, for 4 years. I'd come over for a month at a time, and he had an Irish passport, so he could come and live with me for like a few months, and then I'd come back for a month at a time, and it was great, because it was very romantic. It was, we'd have this, the thing that I liked about it was that it was, have this really kind of dramatic goodbyes at the airport, and then this kind of terrible separation. And then I would just be able to imagine him when I was at home, and I could still, I would not lose myself entirely because he wasn't there. And so then I would look forward to seeing him again. We have these big reunions in the airport, and it was all very loving and exciting. And he was a surfer and a musician, and we would kind of go up the coast. And he was great. And then one thing I really learned from him is I talked a lot, and he didn't talk that much. He laughed with me, but he taught me about silence and about nature, and he showed me some really, really beautiful places in California, for which I'm always grateful for. And he always used to turn around to me and go, "Kathy," he goes, "you need to relax." And I used to turn around and say, "I don't need to relax. Don't you tell me to relax." Funny thing is, when I came into Al-Anon, you'd all say to me, "You need to relax." And I'd go, "Oh, what a good idea," And I would tell him, I said, "You need to trust people. You don't trust anyone. You don't trust people. People are good. People are nice. People are great. And then I came into Al-Anon, I didn't trust anyone. I would tell him what I needed all the time. And anyway, about 4 years into our relationship, of this lovely long-distance relationship, my mother died. And she was the most wonderful mother in the world. And I was about 30, and it was the biggest fear of my life that she would die. And she did, and people do. And I suddenly couldn't rescue him anymore. I couldn't do the thing I did with him anymore. Not that he was asking. But I didn't know how to be with him. I just I had this grief, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I just couldn't kind of say it was okay anymore. And he had come over to live with me, and he was wonderful, but then he couldn't, he lived in London. I ended up, he couldn't get a job, and or he wouldn't get a job. He was too frightened to get a job. And I was paying for everything, and I was paying for his drinking, and he was slowly he said to me, "I'm dying, I've got to go back." And he blamed it on the no sunshine and the rudeness of the English. And we were rude, but it was because he knew he was going under, and he didn't want to take me with him. So he came back to London, and I remember feeling that's the only time I needed anybody in my life. And he went, and I thought, I just ended the relationship. I couldn't do it anymore, and I didn't know why. I just ended it. And I went on an extraordinary journey with my spirituality when my mother died. My mother died in a beautiful way. She was at home, and I was with her, and I nursed her. And I had an extraordinary relationship with a God of my understanding during that 2 years, and I knew what life was about. I knew that life was about love. But I also had this terrible grief, and I also thought that she was a kind of angel, and I was not so good. I was not such a good person as her. Anyway, I went on, and after about 1.5 years, I wanted him back. No reason. Just couldn't get him out of my mind and couldn't get him out of my heart. So I called him, and things were worse in his life. His disease had progressed, and he was broken his probation, and he was living rough in Big Sur, and had a warrant out for his arrest and all sorts. And so I came over thinking, no, let's get married and have babies. So anyway, that didn't work out. I came over, and we got back together, and he had to go into recovery. He was forced into recovery, but he was having to go to 5 meetings a week. And he started to change, and he started to be everything that I always loved about him when I first met him. And he was, I just thought, woo, what is this that's happening to you? And I was like, I want some of that. And someone told me about this place called Al-Anon, never heard of it before, and said they'd take me to a meeting. So I went to my first meeting because I wanted a program like he had one, slightly jealous. And I walked into a meeting in Camarillo, and there's lots of old ladies, I thought, sitting around. And I thought, nah, you know, no. And so this woman said to me, well, look, there's another great one on a Thursday morning in Ventura. Why don't you come to that? And I said, okay, I'll try one more. So I walked into this church, and I thought, I mean, to be honest, you know, a lot of people talk about how they felt at home when they came, and they loved it, and all this stuff. I thought it was really depressing. I thought it was like these really, you know, crappy slogans, and sorry, my sponsor always says don't swear. Is that a swear word? Anyway, I just thought, you all talked a lot about yourselves. You know, and you're just making up a problem, really. And then I would laugh like that. At exactly the same moment that you laughed, I would laugh. And I'd think, what are you doing laughing with me? And I would relate to all these things about perfectionism and obsession and you know, all the things we talk about. I would relate with you, and then but I just didn't want to be with you. I didn't be like you at all. And when I heard you were coming, some of you had been coming for 20 years, I thought, oh, you poor thing. Well, you come like 3 times a week down into like a basement of a church and do this and drink this coffee with powdered milk. Yuck. Anyway, for some reason, there was enough identification for me to keep coming back, and I was really judgmental. I was really bad. You know, someone would talk about their son who was in jail, and I would go, yeah, I don't have a son. And someone would say, yeah, my boyfriend, you know, he was in jail for, you know, like 7 times. I said, yeah, my boyfriend wasn't. He was only in 4. And, you know, I mean, it went on. I was looking for our differences, looking for the differences, you know. And what I do now is look for the similarities. You know, that's what I get to do now. But I kept coming back, and a few weeks in, not long, I kind of understood that I'd grown up in alcoholism. My dad was a huge boozer, and he was fantastic. He was a fantastic man, and really funny, and totally self-righteous, but funny with it. Our house, you know, Alex was talking about being an actress. Both my parents are actors. I'm an actor. My brother's an actor. So I actually felt exactly the same way. I thought that I was going around pretending to be other people, but, you know, I was happy being other people, and then I made a profession out of it. I actually feel far freer being someone else than I do myself, far more nerve-wracking doing this than being on a stage. But our house was very theatrical. We'd have a lot of actors back, unemployed actors, you know. Booze was the big thing, and my dad was a pub drinker, and we'd all go to the bars, and there'd be all these musicians and eccentrics, and it would all be fantastic, you know. My mother, you know, at the same time, it was very chaotic. I didn't have any physical abuse, so I was very lucky. But I think my brother always talks about me being born angry. I actually think I was born terrified. I think I came out the womb quick and went, and just went, hang on a minute. You know, just hang on a minute. Let me just work this thing out, and I'll let you know who I am. And I've been doing that all my life, just absolutely. I've got this mask of, I'll just give you some anger just to ward you off, just to keep you away while I work it out. And I was a very stubborn child, a very willful child, a very terrified child. I spent the whole time in my mum's arms. She was the Al-Anon that kind of looked after me when I didn't know what to do with all that chaos, and I wanted my dad's love desperately, and he was kind of somewhere else a lot of the time, and it's hard to go back to your story because sometimes you get stuck down there and you can never come out. I don't often go back there. I'm just going to be here. My parents divorced when I was 7, and they became very good friends after they got divorced. My dad got a girlfriend who he stayed with till he passed away, and she was an angry Al-Anon. I find Al-Anons a little bit harder than alcoholics. I find untreated Al-Anons really scary sometimes. She was scary. She was jealous of us. She was trying to control him and and she was drinking alongside him, and she was trying to kind of keep him, and I think she felt very threatened and insecure with us, and at the same time she was very loving, so she was kind of very changeable, and they did their thing. My brother always tells, my brother's an Al-Anon too. He came in a few weeks after me. I'm very lucky. He always talks about our childhood, about the games that we used to play with our parents, and one of the things my dad used to do when we used to go on long trips from London to Wales, take about 6 hours driving, and our game in the car, most kids play I Spy, we'd play heart attack procedure. Heart attack procedure, every about half an hour, my dad would go, and he'd fall on the wheel. And my job at 8 was I was sitting behind him, and I would grab him off the wheel and bring him back. And then my brother, who was in the passenger seat, would kind of go and get the wheel, So every half an hour, he'd go, ooh, and we go, oh, heart attack procedure, He made it fun. But, and at the same time, he used to tell me that he was dying all the time and I didn't love him enough and that, whatever. When he was drunk, pissed, we call it. Pissed is drunk in London. My dad always used to say, I'm not a drunk, I'm a piss artist. Londoners would understand that one. But he used to kind of stagger out to the night, and I used to watch him, kind of go out into the night and have to, and I was very young, and I would just think he's going to die. My dad's going to die. He's going to go in front of a car, and I've got to go and get him. And and my brother would always say, he's like a homing pigeon. He always makes his way home, Kath. He'll be okay, and he did. So that was a little bit about my upbringing, and I went out with a lot of lovely men who were all very exciting and had a lot of potential. I was, it was very easy to, if I pick a really kind of gregarious man that needs a lot of work, that I don't have to look at myself. So by the time I got to Glenn, he was a goodie. He was a big project, and the great thing about Glenn was he didn't change when he drank. He wasn't like my dad. He didn't get embarrassing. He didn't get aggressive. He just stayed the same. So I didn't even notice the booze. It was great. I did it alongside him. I was one of those. And anyway, our relationship got better. Then it got worse. Got better. We were both early in recovery, and he was. He was telling me to surrender quite a lot, and I was telling him, we're pointing fingers at each other when it was going wrong and using our programs against each other, and then it would get better, get worse. And I think God did for us what we couldn't do for ourselves, and that relationship ended. He finished it, and I think he thought he couldn't be there for me, and And it was good. It was the right thing. And it's not what I wanted, but that's what happened. And it was on July the 1st, and I flew back to London. And 30 days later, my dad called me and said he had cancer. And 6 weeks later, he passed away. So it felt like these two men, these two beautiful alcoholics in my life, you know, one disappeared and one died. And, you know, I was there with my dad, and we were in that hospital, and my stepmother was there, and there's a lot of fear in that hospital room. There was a lot going wrong. It was all very quick, and my stepmother was kind of shouting at my dad, Glyn, you've got to be positive. Be positive, Glyn. Shout it, you know. I am positive. I am positive. Cathy, what's your opinion on my toe? Right, because he had this clot in his toe, and I said, has it changed colour? And I said, I don't know, Dad. And he goes, what's your opinion? And I said, I don't, honestly, Dad. Glyn, you've got to be positive. And I was like, oh, God. And I said, I don't know. Why don't we wait for the doctor? Oh, you're so cool. You're like a consultant. And I thought, oh, my God, you know. The consultant then came in, and I went to talk to the consultant outside the room because I hadn't met him yet and talking about the cancer, and I asked him lots of questions, and I'd learnt a lot from being with my mum when she passed away, and so the doctor thought I was a consultant. It's hilarious. So I came back and told my dad, and he went, oh, did he? Did he think you were a consultant? I said, yeah, and he goes, and from that moment on, he trusted me implicitly to look after him, which was such a gift of the ego. But, you know, I was in that room, and I was there, and she's shouting, and he's shouting at me, and I'm shutting down, and the disease of alcoholism is alive and well. And here we are, and I said, look, I think we all need to calm down. And she was, don't you tell me to be calm! You know, don't you tell... And I suddenly thought, oh, I'm in Al-Anon, I'm 6 months in, am I controlling? Am I trying to be controlling of her? And I thought, yeah. I am. And I turned around and I said, I'm really sorry. I said, that's what I need. I need to be calm. I'm really sorry. I don't mean to tell you what you need. She was off. She was still shouting. But I realized that my dad, had a disease. And I'm so grateful that I knew that before he died. And I'm so grateful that, you know, that I got to know that he did the best he could. And the last night, it was one night, and my brother was there with the kids. I don't have any kids. And my stepmother was there, and she'd loaded of dogs. And my brother said, do you mind doing the night shift? And because I got the kids. And Carrie said, do you mind doing it because I got the dogs? And I went, this resentment. I thought, yeah, typical, you know what I mean? Typical. Cathy, you know, Cathy does everything. Cathy, who has no kids, Cathy, you know. I thought, yeah, okay, I'll do it, you know. And, you know, I got to spend the last night of my dad's life lying in a bed next to him and looking after him and giving me a kiss, you know, when he was in pain and making sure he was comfortable. You know, what a gift is that I got that. And I remember going outside the hospital just for a little break, and I thought, you know, God, what does Al-Anon say? You know, is there something that I need before he goes? Is there something I need to ask or say? Or, you know, I said, God, I don't really know. And I just thought, maybe I just need to know if he's proud of me. And I thought, you know, I'll be okay with that. I can do that later in my steps, you know, when I work those things that people talk about. I'll be okay with that. And I went up, and we got him home, and to his home in Wales, his little cottage, and we got him there, and I was sitting with him, and I don't know to this day where it came from. I know it came from God. But I sat down, and I was holding his hand, and out of my mouth came, he was unconscious, you know. Out of my mouth came, I said, Dad, I said, I'm so proud of you. You're doing this so well. And he opened his eyes and he looked at me and he said, am I? And I said, yeah. And he squeezed my hand. And then he passed away 10 minutes later. And that's how this program works for me. I give what I want to receive. I came back to California. After a little while, I did the funeral, and I wanted to come back here. I went to Al-Anon in London, but I was very judgmental there still. You know, I had to come 6,000 miles away to get honest and trust people, firstly. And I arranged for a visa, and I said, I'm coming back, and I'm going to come back for 6 months. I've got this little house on the sand in Oxnard, and God's delivered me somewhere beautiful, and I'm going to work these steps, and I'm ready, and I'm willing to do whatever you old ladies, you young ladies, whatever you tell me, I'm going to do it. I hadn't got a sponsor, even though I've been going to lots of meetings. I said, I've just got to get any old sponsor, anybody who's done the 12 steps. And I went to a meeting, and I'd already spoken to some guy, and I said, and he goes, what do you want in a sponsor? And I said, I just want someone spiritual. And he goes, I don't know about that, but have you spoken to this lady, Judy? And I said, no, I've never met Judy. And there was a Judy in that meeting that night, and of course, I don't think I'd met her. She'd been in nearly every single meeting I'd been to for the past 11 months. I just hadn't seen her. Anyway, she was there, and she had I was thinking, is that the right sponsor? Because I was trying to find the perfect one, of course, you know. And I said, is that the right sponsor? And I thought, what are those things on her socks? There's some animals on her socks. Is it a sign? You know. And I said, if they are like, because when my mother died, I had these amazing robin redbreasts, you know, they used to come to me and come around me for like 3 months. And I thought, if they're robins, that's it. She's my sponsor. I've never met this lady before. I go up to her and I go, hi. And she goes, hi. And I said, what are those things on your socks? And she just looked at me, she goes, oh, they're cows. And I went, oh. You know, and I just laughed and I said, Cathy, ask the lady. For Christ's sake. So I just went out and I said, will you be my sponsor? Do you sponsor people? Will you be my sponsor? And she goes, oh. She goes, why don't you call me? So I called her every day for 30 days. She, have you got a service commitment? I said, no. She goes, get one. And I said, or two. And I said, what kind? And she goes, any one, the first one that comes along. I said, okay. So my first commitment was the secretary at Santa Paula meeting on a 9:30 morning. It was a 4th step meeting, and it was a nightmare because I had to open up, and I have a little defective character of being late, and it had an alarm system, and it was, you know, early, and it was in Santa Paula. I've never been there. I got my little car, and I'm driving. Anyway, I did it, and I loved it, and I felt proud of myself. You know, I never wanted to do service. I thought that was for the old ladies that liked having tea and wanted to come here forever. And the reason I didn't want to do service, I realize now that I do service, is because I thought I couldn't do service. I didn't think I could turn up. I couldn't do commitment. I didn't know what that was. I was frightened I would do something wrong. And I realize now that, you know, I could, and it makes you a part of and gets you in there, and I realize I can do it. However, I was the coffee girl on a Wednesday night at the same time, and after 3 weeks, I dropped the coffee pot. There is a man in Al-Anon who was at that Wednesday night meeting who thinks that was so funny that he thought he would remind me of it for a year. In the meeting, in his share. And, you know, for 6 months, I was like, you know what, Jay, that's not funny. What's so funny about the pot breaking? Oh, my God. I've only got 15 minutes left. Anyway, after a year, I suddenly got it. I suddenly thought, oh, I just have to laugh at myself. Whether it's funny or not, I'm just going to laugh. And I love the fact that he laughs at me. And we laugh together. Anyway, so I went to within the week, of getting these 2 service commitments, I went to an Al-Anon women's Big Book meeting, where they meet once a month and they share from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous from an Al-Anon perspective. And it was a tag meeting, and the chapter was desperation drinking, and I totally identified with the madness and the insanity just without the alcohol. I was insane. And when I was tagged, I completely lost it, and I was all these tears just came out. I was choking, and this surrender came. And I remember sitting in that room, and I heard someone say, "We love you, Cathy." And it went right into my heart, and I believed it. I believed that you loved me. And that was my spiritual awakening, my first. I never ever thought, I had always had a God in my life. I never trusted people, ever trusted that anybody could be kind and loving. I didn't trust the humanness in myself. I didn't trust the imperfection in myself. So I certainly wasn't going to trust you. And all of a sudden I trusted you. So I could begin to trust me. And I started to do my steps with my sponsor. I did them quick. I didn't know how they would work. I wrote some stuff, I read it, and I thought, how the hell is this going to do anything? Step 2, I remember sharing about my God, and sometimes it was my mum, sometimes it was a cloud, sometimes it was a man with a beard, sometimes it was you guys. I mean, it changed all the time, and I felt like a baby. And I would share this with my sponsor, and she would smile, and it was an amazing process. And that relationship with my God continues to grow. When we got to step 3, she said, "Are you willing to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand God?" And I said, "Well, I think so. And she goes, "You just have to make a decision, It's like the frog on the lily pad. The frog's on there, it just makes the decision to jump. It doesn't jump, just makes the decision." She goes, "Oh, I can do that, and I can make the decision." She goes, "Great." And I said, I was a bit confused about the life business. I could understand handing my will over, but I didn't understand handing my life over. But I just thought, I'll just go with it. And I did my 4th step in 3 weeks, because I was just due to go back to London, and I was afraid that all my defects would meet me at the airport. And so I did my 4th step really quick, and all full-time for 3 weeks. And I did my 5th step, and I'm very proud to say I still own the record of 11 hours with my sponsor on my 5th step, and I'm the longest one she's ever done. I was thorough. Or I went on and on and on and on, one of the two. And I knew a lot of the stuff in that 4th step. There was a couple of surprises. And one of them was that to do with my mum, and just to do with feeling like I needed to make an amends to her for assuming that she would kind of carry me when I didn't know how to carry myself, or I couldn't do that. And just for being a bit rude to her at times. But she'd passed away. But after we did that 5th step, she said, "Okay, are you entirely ready to, hand over your defects?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Great, should we do the 7th step prayer? You learned it?" And I said, "Yeah." So we did the 7th step prayer, and then she goes, "Okay, let's make a list from your 4th step." So I got my list. And she goes, "Great." I said, "What, is that it? I've just done 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm now on 9. And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "This is between you and your God now." And I went, "Oh." And she goes, "God will reveal to you, when you need to make amends, and when you're entirely ready to let those particular defects go." And that was it. And we burnt my 4th step, of which I have a resentment ever since, because I can't remember my defects. Anyway, and then I went... very soon, about a week later, I went on a rafting trip with 30 women in recovery from AA and Al-Anon. Some of you are here. And it was great. However, I was in the lead raft, and there was this period in the river where it was a class 4 rapids, and the guide said, "Ladies, if ever a time to be serious, this is it. This is if you we've never lost anybody at this point in the river. If you happen to go out, just swim to the right." Okay? So we went, yeah. Within 1 minute, 5 of us were out of the boat. okay? And I got that thrill, like, you know, getting excited thrill of drama. I went, woohoo, you know, danger, you know. And I kind of went out the raft, and my head went under, and I couldn't breathe, and I went, okay, this isn't funny. This isn't funny, and I'm scared. And I was thinking, oh, God, and I tried to swim to the right, but my legs were practically being broken with the flow of this water, and so I got into lounge chair position, and I was kind of going along, and I had this amazing debate in my head with fear, you know, and I was thinking, you know, have I got a right to be frightened? Because I'm really frightened. Am I being a baby? Is this, you know, can I, you know, what happens here? Oh, look, there's a rock. What happens when I reach this rock? Do I break my legs? Do I go around the rock? Do I, you know, what? You know, I'm scared. I'm saying, no, you're a baby. You're an idiot. You're, you know, this voice of this, you know, who do you think, you know, you're just a crap, you know, whatever it was. It was just going on and on and on. And then I went round this rock, and I went under this rock, and I went into what they call a water hole, which apparently you can stay in there for a minute, for 3 weeks, a year, you know, as long as, you know, like when it decides to pop you out, you know. And so I got into a little ball, as they told you to do, and I was in this little water hole, and it was freezing. And all I remember that it was just really dark and really cold, and I was really still, and all my fear went. And I just talked to God. And I said, please, will you help me? Please, will you help me? And he just popped me out. And I saw everybody swimming to the right, and I looked at the right, and I had the guide's voice in my head, you know, go to the right, and I thought, no, I'm not going to make it to the right. I looked to the left, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to go to the left. And I just kind of swam serenely to the left, to the last little eddy. And I was safe. And it turns out that about 5 yards ahead, if I hadn't gone into that, it would have been a waterfall to my death. And, you know, what that was my life. That was my third step. That was my will and my life. And it wasn't like God was saying I could kill you. It wasn't anything like that. It just I felt this connection with God, and I felt grateful for my life. And I had the choice of how to look at my life. I could either say, I could have died, it could have been awful, it could have been terrible, or I could say, wow, I'm alive. How beautiful, and what a gift, and thank you. And same choice, Al-Anon gives me choices. And so I was very grateful to those women. They were fantastic when they rescued me. Okay, so I wrote an amends to my boyfriend, Glenn, or my ex-boyfriend, and I started writing an amends letter, and and it was hard to write. And then I hadn't seen him for 18 months. I didn't know where he was, whether he was in Big Sur, wherever he was, Agora Hills, you know, I don't know, he was all over the place. And I couldn't write it, so then I started to think, well, I actually just think I want to know where he is. I don't really want to make an amends. I didn't trust the fact that I wanted to make an amends. I just wanted to know if he's all right, and maybe we'd get back together, or, you know. And then I started to feel really awful about that, and started to think, you know, well, do I, you know? Am I that? You know, I grew up thinking I was a little bit evil and a little bit awful. And I thought, maybe I do just, that's really awful that I maybe think that. And I didn't know whether I did or not. And I started to pray, and my sponsor said pray, and I prayed, and I shared about it at meetings, and I said, you know, I don't even know if he's alive, actually. He had a dangerous life. And I'm not even sure his parents would let me know. So I wanted to know, I thought, God, if you think I need to know that he's alive, let me know. And I kept praying about it, and I said, you know, and I would be quiet, you know, I just thought, I really didn't trust myself at all, actually. I didn't know my motive. And then I saw a car that was very similar to his, which was quite an unusual car, and I said, yeah, God, you're going to have to make it a bit more obvious than that. I need a bit more help. And not really thinking anything was going to happen. And anyway, I pulled into a gas station. I didn't need any gas, about 6 miles from where I lived. And I got out of my car, and there he was, one hand on the gas pump and one hand on the back of my car. And I just went, wow. I said, I've just been praying about you. And he goes, yeah, I was just praying over there. And you rolled in. And And I got to understand that I was really pleased he was alive. I was really grateful that he was alive and okay. And I got to make my amends that day. And I was really unprepared. And I said, I got to make my amends. And he said, you don't have to do that. And I said, no, I do. And I said, I tried to change you for 7 years. And you were perfectly fine just the way you were. And I'm really sorry. And he said, yeah, I guess only my higher power can change me. And in my head, I was saying, yeah, but you got to do the footwork. And out of my mouth came, yeah. You know, that's recovery for me. I had so many amends. My dad's girlfriend, who I called my dad's girlfriend, even though she was with him for 25 years, I call her my stepmother now, because I didn't want her to be around. She is my living amends. I don't talk to her about my dad's drinking. She lives in the middle of nowhere. She's isolated. She's where ended up, where alcoholism took them. And she misses him terribly. He was everything to her. She has no children, and she misses him. And I get to phone her up, and I get to tell her that I love her. And the first time I phoned her up, I felt like I was puking. I said, I love you. And I thought, this can't be right. And then the next time I said it, it came out a bit easier, and then I said it again, and I said it again, and then I realized I did love her. And I realized that I'd always loved her. I was just frightened to tell her. And so I have a really lovely relationship with her today. So many miracles have happened to me since I've been here. And my program, I've had really amazing ones. People turn up in the middle of nowhere. I'm as well as being an actor, I work with young people. I work with young people at risk, and I teach them drama. And I often used my temper to control the classroom. And I used to get really angry if someone wasn't sensitive in the room. And I had an amends to make for this one girl who I hadn't seen for 6 years. Didn't know where she was anymore, where she ended up. I just remember this anger I had towards her. I'm not sure how it came out, but I had it. It was like that rage. And anyway, when I was ready, entirely ready, I had a whole group I was teaching, facilitating, and they were really hardcore, and they were difficult, and they brought me to my knees. And suddenly I realized that all my tactics, all my way of controlling, all that anger was not going to work. And I let go, and I said, I've got to stop doing this, and I've got to find a different way of communicating if things get difficult. And so I was willing. And then this random girl in the middle of Trafalgar Square in London with 1,000 people, there was some event there, and I feel this little tap on my shoulder, and there she is. And I say, wow, God. And I said, I need to apologize to you. I was really, really angry, and that anger had nothing to do with you. It's all to do with me. And I'm really sorry. And she said, no, God, everyone else is more angry than you with me. And I said, I don't care about them. I said, that anger had nothing to do with you. Today, I sponsor women in London. I have one rogue sponsee that's left over here that refuses to get another sponsor, who I love, who had longer recovery than me. And I was very intimidated when she asked me. She's been longer than me. And all I got to share with her is that I think she needs to share more her recovery, because it's wonderful. And I'm still badgering her. And I sponsor women in London, and that's how I give back. I find sponsorship hard. I need to shut my mouth a lot and listen, and it really makes me work my program. And I'm really grateful for those girls, and it is just such an amazing thing to watch people transform, and when they get it and they do it, and it's such an honor. And I give back in that way, and I do service, and I love doing service. I have a relationship today that I've been in for 4 years. I spent 3 years on my own, and then I met someone. He's not an alcoholic. If anything, he may belong in these rooms. He's a caretaker. He looks after people. But he's kind, and we both have a commitment to honesty and in a relationship, and we have a commitment to no drama, and we have a commitment to not losing ourselves in that relationship. And I cannot believe how I am. How I am. I am capable of having a healthy relationship, and I'm so proud of that. And I'm lucky because it's him, but I also feel proud that I'm not doing the same thing I used to do. I'm not telling him who he should be. There is a dilemma that I have in that it's taken me this long to find a healthy relationship, to be healthy in a relationship. It's taken me this long to think that I deserve to be a mother. And I'm 42, and this guy has 2 kids. And he wasn't sure, but he doesn't want them. He doesn't want any more children. And one more time, I have this little voice in my head that if he loves me, he would do that. He would change for me. And what's amazing, really amazing, is that I can still love him and accept him as he is, and still desire that in myself, and I still have choices. I don't know what to do. I need to talk to God a lot. But I can put myself in his shoes. And there are no arguments, when we're together. And it's a miracle. It's a miracle. And, only God knows my future. And I'm going to trust God. And I just had to face, well, who am I if I am not a mother? What kind of woman am I going to be okay if I'm not that? And I will be okay. And I will be okay if I am. Very grateful. I'd like to, so much to say, isn't there? Once you get going. I'd like to end on, I've been blessed to have helped 2 people, at least, 2 people that my parents die. And I have been there when they've died. And it's an incredible privilege to be able to do that. And I saw something, I've seen something twice that I want to share with you that is that when my mother died, about 10 hours later, she died at home, my brother came up to me and he said, "Cathy, you've got to come upstairs. And you've got to come upstairs and see this." And I came upstairs, my mum had been unconscious for a few days, and there she was, all of a sudden, smiling. Her face was at peace. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my whole life. And I thought it had something to do with my mother's personality, her spirit, for 5 years, until I saw my dad die. Now, my dad was much more he was unrecovered. He had lots of guilt, he had lots of remorse, he had lots of anger. Same thing. I went into his bedroom afterwards, and his face was like, the only way I can describe it was that it was an out-breath, and the soul was free from the body, from this mortal coil that we live in. And I think if ever I'm in doubt that there's something else, there we go. I've got both these faces to know. And I feel that, life is sometimes hard, and it's hard. Alcoholism is hard. And life happens, and but there's a freedom that Al-Anon gives me within my life. It gives me that freedom now. How lucky are we to have that freedom of spirit now? And I'm very thankful to a lot of the women in this room. I honor you. I thank you for hugging me, for loving me until I learned to love myself. I'm thankful to all the alcoholics and the beautiful people that are here loving each other one day at a time. Thank you for letting me share.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.